So we have a question that says, when you speak of accepting the other person, does that include behavior such as gambling, if it's upsetting to, let's say, you? We're always talking about accepting and loving people. So let's say that the other person, obviously I don't know who it is, but if you're willing to indicate in your question who it is, I can get more personal. It's up to you. But let's say it's your husband. So your husband's out there gambling away money that's in part yours. So does that affect you? Sure, it does. Is that okay that he does that? No, it's not. It's selfish on his part. It's unloving on his part. It has a detrimental, destructive effect on you. And the inclination is to jump in and attack him and criticize and control him. It gets a lot easier if we understand why is he gambling. Gambling gives people a feeling of power, excitement, pleasure, even praise. When you walk into a gambling establishment and you have money, everybody around you starts paying you attention. I mean, it's a way of buying affection. So you get a lot out of going into a gambling place. I mean, it's instant purchase. I never understood this before, by the way, till I went with a friend gambling. You walk into the place, you're greeted by the guy at the front door who says, "Oh, welcome here." There are these chicks walking around saying, "Can I feed you? Can I give you something to drink?" You're instantly the popular person if you've got money. And the more money you have, the more attention you get. So it's a way of buying affection. Does that make it okay? Well, no, it doesn't. But it's a way of purchasing imitation love when you don't have enough real love. So you have to see what your husband is doing. He's empty, he's alone, he's afraid, he doesn't feel loved, and he goes out with his money and he's trying to buy love. So that's what he's doing. So he's already empty and feeling unloved. If you come along and you say, "I hate it that you do that. You have to stop that," how do you think that's going to affect him? The more you nag at him, the less loved he will feel, and the more likely he'll be to go out and have to buy more imitation love. Do you see that? In fact, you've probably already noticed that, haven't you? That the more you nag him and the more you push him, it doesn't make him gamble less, it makes him gamble more. And the same is true with any form of addiction. Addiction to gambling, addiction to sex, to money, to power, to whatever. The harder you push these people, the more empty they become and the more they do it. Now, does that mean that you have to accept what he's doing? No. But if you nag him about it and try to control him, you'll only make it worse. There's only one solution to this problem. The problem is rooted in the lack of real love. So the solution is in loving him. Now, many people at this point say, well, but if I just love him, then essentially I'm going to be saying that I condone his behavior. No, you're not. And, you know, people really aren't as stupid as you think. He already knows gambling's wrong. He really does know that. And if you start to simply love him where he is, he will know that you're not condoning gambling. He already knows how you feel about the subject, doesn't he? I mean, haven't you made it pretty clear? So he's got that. But if you were to go to him, for example, and say, I love you. And up till now, I've criticized you, nagged you, controlled you, told you in 100 different ways that I don't love you by being impatient with you. I've been wrong to do that. I'm not going to nag you about gambling anymore. It's been wrong. So instead, I'm just going to love you and support you. The more loved and supported, cared for that he feels at home, the less likely he'll be to go out and gamble. Now, that doesn't make it your responsibility to cure his gambling problem. It doesn't make it your fault that he is gambling. But since the only solution is real love, you're probably the best chance he's got. So you're not condoning it, but love is the best way out. Everything else fails. Any questions so far? What we're afraid of is that if we don't reach in and take hold of something, if we don't control it, we're afraid that we won't get our way. And that's not the goal. Love's the goal. We really want a loving relationship. We don't want to control another person. If you love them, you're going to get the best results, better than by anything else you do. Promise. And if you want to come back to this question, ask some more about it. Another person asks, can people use kindness as a form of control? Give me some examples, if you can, of where you've seen that done. But absolutely, yes. I've seen many people who do things for other people. They're kind, they appear to be caring, and what they're really doing is controlling the people around them so that they will like them, so that they will give them gratitude, so that they'll do what they want. I was in a real love group once, years ago, and there was a kindly, sweet little, probably 70-year-old grandmother in that group. And as we were talking about real love and how real love makes people happy, then the people in the group said, well, what about the example of Helen? I don't remember if that was her name. And they pointed to this little old lady and they said, she's kind and loving to everyone, but her husband's angry all the time. So if real love works, then how could her husband resist her being loving? So I asked her a little bit about her being loving. And it became quickly apparent that this woman, everywhere she goes, does things for people constantly. She never stops. Morning to night, she's the one that bakes the bread and the cookies and the muffins and takes things to the newborn babies and is always doing things for people. But she feels compelled to. She doesn't do it out of just an overflowing of her heart. She does it because she feels like she really has to. And if people don't respond to her in kind, if they don't respond to her with, oh, Helen, thank you so much, she becomes irritated. So as she gives things to people, as she's kind to them, she expects gratitude, appreciation, understanding, loyalty, gifts in return, praise, power. She expects a lot in return for kindness. She also expects a certain amount of safety. The more kind things she does for people, the less they can criticize her. So to answer your question, I'll say people can use kindness as a really manipulative little tool. Somebody's asking the question that will real love help with fear that evolves into panic attacks? Fear that is that intense? Absolutely. Now, can I guarantee that it will change your panic attacks right now? No. But panic attacks really are just at one end of the fear spectrum. I can't begin to describe how painful the wounds are of being told, I don't love you, as a child, and through the rest of our lives. We get to the point where we are afraid of everything. I'll give you the example of, for example, if enough consecutive painful events happen to us, we become absolutely uncontrollable in our fear. In a war, for example, there was a phenomenon, well, there still is a phenomenon, that's called shell shock. If people are involved in shelling and shooting and they're around danger long enough, well, actually now we call it post-traumatic stress. They get to the point where everything around them becomes a threat. They respond to everything with fear. And they become literally crippled or incapacitated by it. People who experience panic attacks get to that point. People who've not had a panic attack really don't understand what they're like. But it's like if you haven't been loved long enough, the pain in your life builds up and up. It's like having a total body sunburn all the time. So imagine that you got a sunburn from head to foot and you're in a crowded room. You would feel paranoid constantly that somebody was going to touch you, wouldn't you? If you couldn't get out of the room, you'd stand in a corner almost and erect a fence around you because you'd be sure that somebody was going to touch you and make your pain worse. When we haven't been loved enough, we're in that kind of pain and in that kind of fear. So the answer to your question is, if we get enough unconditional love in our lives, the pain begins to diminish. And in the absence of pain, well, what happens to the fear? It has to diminish. It has to go away. And so our behavioral responses to pain and fear also have to diminish, which is panic attacks, anger, running, acting like a victim, all the other things that we do when we're empty and afraid. So to answer your question, yes, and it may take a while, but it also takes persistence on your part. You'll have to reach out and expose yourself bit by bit to more and more loving contact from other men and women on a regular, really regular basis. People over and over ask me, how can I change my life, essentially, without becoming involved with other people? There isn't a way. There really isn't. We really have to reach out and have that regular contact where we actually feel loved. Simply studying real love isn't enough. We've got to feel the power of it. So we're talking about the man who gambles. And the question is that he plays poker once or twice a week for small stakes, like for $5 or whatever. Now, here's where you're going to have to kind of work something out between you. Let's say, for example, that, because again, you cannot control him. You can't do it. So you might say to him, I am not going to control your life. I'm not going to do it. Now, the financial aspect of your gambling concerns me some. But even then, I am not going to control your life. If you're interested, now this is me speaking for you, like I was speaking to your husband. If you're interested in reducing my fear about the finances, we could talk about, for example, how much money you could spend per week, how much money you could lose per week without it becoming frightening to me. Do you see what I'm saying? So like, for example, let's say he were somebody who golfed. Well, gosh, if he golfed with greens fees and golf balls and, whatever golfers buy, I don't golf. Gosh, that's got to cost him at least, I don't know, depending on the course, I suppose, $30, $40, $50, $60 a time. So if he were spending $50 a week on golf, and that were a big source of relaxation to him, my guess is you could probably live with that. So you might say to your husband, I'm not going to control your gambling. It's much more important that I love you than that I control that. If you're concerned about my fears about the financial aspects, could we come up with a dollar amount that you could lose per week that you would just consistently stay under? So that he would say, oh, okay, I'll gamble online until I lose $25 in a week, or $27.35, something. And when I get to that amount, I'll stop. That's something you and he will have to work out. But even then, you tell him, my loving you is more important than my controlling you. Because it's the real love in your relationship that you want. That's the ultimate goal. That's the holy grail of relationships, is real love, not controlling our partners. We were talking a moment ago about, can people control other people with kindness? And this same lady came in and said, my boss is always thanking me for everything I do. He seems to be sincere, but he keeps repeating the thank you until I say, you're welcome. Sometimes he even thanks me when I don't know what I did. That is an example of controlling somebody. Sometimes somebody does something for me and I say, thanks, I'm done. Any thank you that goes on and on, for example, oh, thank you so much, why, I just can't thank you enough, why, that's the very best, whatever it is I've ever gotten. When we go on and on, what we're really telling people is, I'd like you to do that again. And if we thank people and we hang around waiting for anything, then it wasn't really a thank you. It was a manipulation. I remember, where was I? One day I was someplace and a lady walked up to me and she said, wow, you look like you've been exercising and losing some weight. And I said, okay. And she started to walk away and she came back and she said, well, aren't you going to say thank you? So it wasn't really a compliment, was it? It was an investment on her part. She wanted to hear gratitude. And we do that all the time. Most of our gifts, most of what we say to people, are not without attachment. We want something back. And it's only because we're empty that we want something back. It's not out of some evil motivation. So that is an example of a controlling behavior. My producer is sending me messages secretly. So how do you handle it when he does that? Well, there's two ways you can go. If it's at work and it's kind of the social norm when somebody says thank you, then, you're really not in a place at work to teach people what relationships are. Make sense? So at work, you kind of conform to social norms. And you say, you're welcome, whether you mean it or not. Notice that when I talk about the importance of telling the truth, I talk about the importance of telling the truth about our mistakes, our own. We're not in the business of pointing out everybody else's mistakes. That's a terrible error. We're not here to teach everybody else how to behave or to teach everybody else what real love is, whether they want to hear it or not. I'm going to shove it down your throat. No, we're not in that position. So we need to kind of lighten up on that and understand that most of the world doesn't understand the principles of unconditional giving, unconditional love, and that when somebody says thank you, sometimes it's okay just to say you're welcome, knowing that they're manipulating us for it. So what? Just like when somebody says, well, how are you? Well, 99% of the time, they're not really asking. It's just a social custom. And so you say, okay. You see? For a couple of years, I lived in the islands of Samoa, out in the middle of nowhere in the South Pacific. And it was just a social custom. It sounds absurd. Everything in Samoa is either uphill or downhill. It's either toward the sea or it's toward the mountains, because that's all there is the mountain and the sea and what's in between. And so if you're headed down from the mountain toward the sea and somebody's coming up, as you pass them, if you're going down, you actually say, are you headed up toward the mountain? And the other person says, are you headed down toward the sea? And you both say, yes, thank you, and you move on. It's just a socially expected greeting. It's not a genuine question. And so we've got to understand there's a certain amount of that in our society and live with it. Here's somebody asking about parenting. What do you suggest that one parent should do when the other parent is drowning with the child? How can I help when I see my partner attacking our child? This is a pretty common event. So here we've got two parents. This particular lady who's asking, woman, she sees she says partner, I'll just say husband because it gets all confusing. Just identifies male-female immediately. So she sees her husband, say, berating a child, which, by the way, is a very vicious event. When you see somebody just even criticizing a child, just raising your voice, what have I told you? What the child is hearing is, I don't love you. And it's really very much the emotional equivalent of taking a stick and beating the child. That's how it feels to the kid. So here she is watching this. She's recognizing that the effect on the child is horrible, and she wants to jump in and save the child. Wow, I mean, duh, who wouldn't, huh? It's a very natural inclination. If you give in to that inclination and jump in and save that kid, short of the child being choked to death, if you jump in and save the child, you will regret it. Don't do it. Why? What's the only reason that your husband is attacking that child? We're back to the same stuff. Drowning, empty and afraid. Then you come in and say, you're attacking this child and it's not right. How do you think he's going to hear that? He's going to hear that as a criticism of him and that he's not loving, and he's going to hear, I don't love you. He's now going to feel more empty and afraid. Now what's he going to do? Now he's going to attack both of you, and it's going to be worse for the child. So you wait until the attack with the child is over. Do I know that that's hard? Yeah, I do. But it's been going on for a long time. Just, you're going to have to live with it this time. Then when it's all over, as in the next day, I mean it, don't do it that night. If you wait until your husband walks into the next room and then you say, you know, I want to talk about what you just did, you will be doomed. And if you doubt that, go try it. And you can learn for yourself. But it won't work. So what I suggest you do is just wait. Wait until the next day. Sing a song. I don't care. But wait. Go gambling with the other woman's husband, playing poker. But take your time. And then say to him, you know, let's say the child's name is Susie. You say, Fred, the other day I was listening to you interact with Susie about the, I don't know, whatever they were fighting about, cleaning the room. And it sounded like it was frustrating to you. Notice, there's no accusation in that. Do you think how important this is? Notice I didn't say you were a butthead to her. I don't like it that you attack her. If you attack him, you're done. Now, I realize you have a justification for attacking him because what he did is wrong. I got that. But if you attack somebody who's empty and afraid, you will lose. So why do it? So you say, Fred, so it looked to me like you were frustrated with Susie. Now this is the next day, remember? And I see here that you just asked, what can you do to help him feel loved? Now, there's nothing you can do to help him feel loved at the time he's having that conflict with the child. Like I just said, ignore it. The next day, you ask about it. Gosh, it looked like you were frustrated. In the moment that you say, it looks like you're frustrated, look what I just did. I didn't attack. I just asked you about you. It looks like you were frustrated. See this? How are you feeling? What he's going to do then is say, well, yeah, I'm frustrated. The little stinker, and he'll probably go off in a rant about what she did wrong. Which gives you a wonderful opportunity not to defend her. If you defend her, you're dead. But just to love him. And so you reach over while he's attacking her, which you realize is just like a little nuts, right? I mean, here we have a 40-year-old attacking the behavior of a 9-year-old. I mean, how crazy is that? And so you reach over and you touch him on the shoulder and you say, I understand. It can be very frustrating when she doesn't pay attention, when you've been telling her something 8 times in a row. And my experience is, and now you just loved him, now you're going to teach him something. And you say, it's been my experience that when people don't feel loved, they don't hear. They don't hear anything we're saying. And I know in great part, a lot of it's my fault that she doesn't feel loved. So I know that, at least speaking for me, I'm trying to learn to love her better so that she can hear me better and so that she'll be happier. What you just did was love him and teach him with no criticizing. He will hear that roughly, and I'm not exaggerating at all, 1,000 times better than any other approach you'll take. Now, will it make a difference every time? Maybe not. But again, it will work way better than you're going in and try to stop him or control him. Don't do it. Loving and teaching are what works. These are very good questions. It's a really tempting thing to save our children, but we do it at a huge expense. If you save your child, you'll irritate your partner, and you'll teach your child that your child is a victim that needs to be saved. And once you teach a kid that he or she is a victim, you just as well take the child out back and shoot her in the head. Children who are taught that they're victims are cripples for the rest of their lives. I'm not joking. So squelch that tendency or that temptation to save her. Even though there is an element of altruism, an element of goodness in it, in the end it will not serve you, it will not serve your husband, it will not serve her. So here's a man who says after 22 years, his wife moved out 2 months ago and says she doesn't know what she wants. She says she doesn't want to drag it out. So what concerns should I have? We're starting from scratch here. So let me ask you, what does she know about real love? Anything? And while you're typing that in, the only reason that she would be leaving the marriage is that she doesn't feel loved. If she felt completely unconditionally loved by you, there's no reason she'd leave the marriage, ever. So we know she doesn't. Now, does that make it all your fault? No, not necessarily. So it's not entirely your responsibility to teach her about real love either. But we know that she doesn't feel loved. That's why she's leaving. And it's easier for her to say, well, I just don't want to drag it out, because she's convinced that with you it will only be more pain. Clear? She's already experienced so much pain with you that she doesn't want to experience any more. And so if you genuinely want to work out a marriage with her, you'd have to communicate to her that there's a possibility of working out a marriage without it being just an unending series of more pain. So I would suggest this. Again, I don't know how much about real love she knows, but I would approach her. I don't know how much about real love you know, but I would approach her and tell her this. You know, I've just learned some stuff about unconditional love, which convinces me that during our entire marriage, all you've ever wanted from me is for me to love you unconditionally. And until recently, until recently, I thought I was loving you. And I'm just learning that I haven't been loving you. I've been approving of you when you did what I wanted, but I haven't been loving you unconditionally, which is the only thing that counts. So that's left you feeling empty and alone and afraid and in pain. And I can't tell you that I'm going to learn to love you overnight, but I can make a commitment that I will try to learn to love you. And that is a huge thing. Huge. If she's willing to stay with you while you learn to love her, that's pretty much all you can ask. You'd have to be willing to make quite a commitment, though, to learn to love her. And if both you and she are willing to make that commitment, I'd be glad to talk to both of you on the phone. And my assistant will give you a number that you can call, and we'll see if we can get that process started. But it can be quite a miracle. So I would suggest you talk to her. You talk about your mistakes as a husband. You talk about how you have screwed it up and how you would like to learn to do it differently. Wives tend to really melt when you describe how you made the mistakes. Don't you talk about what she did. And then you say, in the process of learning to do it differently, would you be willing to talk with me with somebody who is helping me learn about real love? That gets the interest of the vast majority of partners. Whereas if you go in and you start to tell her what she's done wrong, you're done. She's going to want to get it over with, in your own words. Here's a quote that says, I've had the most awesome, incredible experiences, here's a great phrase, telling on myself. It's setting me free from my getting and protecting behaviors. At what point do I stop? Well, if you're having a great time doing something, why stop? Shoot. The more that we share with people who we are, including our mistakes, our stupidness, our flaws, our getting and protecting behaviors, the more we create opportunities for people to see us for who we are, accept us as we are, and unconditionally love us. So why would that ever quit? I mean, I'm doing it all the time. I do it every day. I run into people who ask me about my life, and I describe it everywhere I go. And as a result, feel more loved, more connected, and more loving. So, I just can't think of a reason for you to quit. If you can, let me know. And I'm glad you're having a good time. Those of you who are watching, there's November 11 and 12, there's going to be a 2-day Real Love immersion where from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, there are going to be people gathering from all over the country just to share real love with each other. It's a very powerful experience. Very relaxed, very easy. People just accepting and loving each other just like we're doing right now. And has proved to make quite a difference in many lives. So, for example, the man who asked about his wife, go to the conference. You'll learn more about real love than you would in simply reading a book. The woman who asked about her husband and the child, go to the conference in Phoenix and bring your husband. It's a great way to get to know other people who are learning about real love, and a great way to go and feel the power of real love. Real love is so much more than a principle. It's a power that we need to feel and allow to transform and heal us. And we need other people for that. It's something we can't do by ourselves. Somebody said, am I ever coming out to Hawaii? That's hysterical. I'd love to, since it's my favorite place in the country. So all you have to do is plan a seminar and get enough people there, and I'll be there. How's that? So it's really mostly... putting on a seminar is regrettably mostly about financial feasibility, just about making the travel and the arrangements, and we've got 5 employees here that make things happen like that, and it's just about getting enough people there. So if you have contacts, of a place to have it, our experience is that the best way to do a seminar is you plan a place, you plan a time, you come up with a advertising kind of plan or the number of people you think you can get there, and we'll talk about it and we'll do it. I mean it. We'll be there. What island are you on? Any more questions, by the way, while we're waiting from the gambler or the gambler's mama or the wife of the husband who can be unkind to children, or anybody else? These are very, very important questions. So you're on Maui. They have a nice studio there on Maui for having conferences, and so it's just about a matter of coordinating it. There is a therapist on Maui, in fact, who runs a radio show every 2 weeks, and she could do advertising of the seminar. So that would be another way to spread the word about that. So if you'd like, if you're serious about it, I can give you her name, and that'd be another contact person, and just about making it happen. I was just asked again about the man who'd been married for 22 years and was separated, and his wife didn't want to drag it out. I answered that question for some time, and the answer will be recorded and archived and within the next several days you'll be able to find that recorded and archived on the web if you look under video chats. And so you'll be able to read it there. If you have questions specifically about what we could do to help you and your wife, I believe Ben sent you a phone number you can call, and we can take it from there by phone. So if we don't have any more questions, there have been great questions tonight. One more question? This lady says, my brother is upset that I missed his birthday party and did not give him a present. How should I help him to feel loved without just buying a present? In our society, because we don't know how to love unconditionally, we substitute for real love things like, well, everything else. Power, praise, pleasure, sex, money, and gifts. Valentine's Day, Christmas, birthdays, and so on are really dates where we prove to the people around us that we love them. I mean, there's something seriously wrong with that picture. Do you see what it is? If you talk to people around those dates, Valentine's Day, Christmas, for example, the word that they use in association with shopping is absolutely uniform. What is it? I have, H-A-V-E, have to go do my Christmas shopping, which means I feel a horrible obligation to go do it. That's awful. There's no obligation in love. I don't feel obligated to unconditionally love anybody. So in other words, the real reason that most of the time we give gifts is we're afraid of what will happen if we don't. And so, boy, we're really stuck, aren't we? Because around those dates, our birthdays and so on, we expect people to give us things, just like your brother. Your brother expected a birthday present from you. Then when he didn't get it, he was irritated. There wasn't anything you could have done to make him feel loved because he demanded it. If I reach out with my hand and grab you by the throat and say, love me, no matter what you say after that, will I feel loved? No, because I forced you to love me. And that's what happens with expectations. Anytime somebody demands or expects something from you, and then you give it to them, they won't feel loved. They'll feel like you filled their order. Well, how fulfilling is that? It's not. And so he ruined any possibility of feeling loved by you. Now, are you going to be able to explain all that to him? You know, unless he understands real love pretty well, probably not. But one thing you can do is this. You can take him aside and you can say, you know, I didn't give you a birthday present this last time, and I got to tell you why. It has nothing to do with you. All my life I have felt this pressure to give people presents, and I have felt this enormously destructive expectation of other people to give me presents. And it's really made me selfish. You've got to make this about you, because it is. And it's ruined special days for me. It's just made them awful. So I don't enjoy Christmas or holidays or anniversaries, or I don't like them. And so from now on, what I've decided to do is I'm going to, instead of going around requiring people to prove to me that they love me on those days, or instead of trying to prove to everybody else I love them, I'm going to make it the project of my life to learn to better love the people around me, including you. So, I apologize that by not giving you a present, it looked like I didn't care about you, but what I'm really trying to do is to love you better. You have about a 90% chance or better that your brother will go, well, oh, well, cool. Because you just told him you're trying to care about him. And you're going to break the cycle of the endless gift giving and expectations. So I'd say give that a shot. I've seen it work 9 times out of 10. And in the very few times it doesn't work, they get over it. Really. All that expectations and stuff doesn't ever produce real love anyway, so why bother? A friend who lives 500 miles away shared with me that her grown daughter is addicted to drugs. How can I encourage her while she and her husband, are trying to get their daughter into treatment? Well, in the first place, if your friends have a grown daughter, they don't really have a right to push her into treatment. They don't. And so, here we're working really third party. But when people have a grown daughter, they're done. And, they can encourage her, but the most important thing that they can do with their grown daughter is love her. They need to read the book, Real Love and Parenting, before they even talk about drug treatment, way before they talk about drug treatment. This girl's obviously been on drugs for more than a week, so what's the rush? They need to read the book Real Love and Parenting. They need to sit down with her and say, here we've been nagging at you and ragging on you about drug treatment, when what we really should have been talking about is the fact that we've never known how to unconditionally love you. And we're going to start learning how to do that. We're going to quit trying to control you and tell you what to do and criticize you, and learn how to be better parents instead of trying to force you into treatment. That's what they need to say to her at this point, not how do we get you into treatment. Do you see that? We don't have the right to control other adults. We don't. Last question. If we've been involved in church all of our lives, why didn't I understand real love until I had the pain of divorce? Oh, why didn't I understand the real love my whole life either? Even though the message of real love is inherent in the message of really every major religion on the planet, what happens is this. Real love is the central message of Christianity, Islam, all the religions that I know of, the major religions. But regrettably, these messages are taught by human beings. So, let's say that the major central message of Christianity were calculus, differential equations. And I'm the one teaching it, and I don't understand the first thing about calculus or differential equations. How do you think I'm going to teach it? I'm going to teach it in terms of simple math. 1 plus 1, 2 plus 2, or whatever it is I know. So we tend to teach a thing in terms of what we know and who we are. So even though the central message from the beginning has always been about real love or unconditional love, the people who teach these messages, on the whole, have never seen real love and certainly are not themselves unconditionally loving. So they're not in a position where they're able to teach unconditional love. So we go to church year after year after year, and frankly, we don't get taught the central message of real love, even at church. Even though it's inherent in the doctrines, in the scriptures of whatever religion it is that we're studying, we don't get it from the people who teach it. And in your case, for example, as you went through the pain of divorce, it's very often when we get to the lowest places in our lives, when we're in the greatest pain, that we're most willing to listen. When we're not in quite so much pain, we think we know something. And so we're willing to continue to fill our lives with whatever form of imitation love we've been clever enough to use up to that point. When we finally get humbled enough, we're willing to finally learn something, and that's when we discover the real secrets. So it's been great being with you guys. I suggest advertise to everybody else you know that we'll be on again a week from today, and we'll be answering whatever questions you want to submit on the video chat. We'll stay here for as long as you'd like. And so I recommend that you come back a week from now, and that you also go look on the website for all the additional features that the webmaster is adding just daily, and that you consider meeting us November 11 and 12 in Phoenix. We look forward to seeing you there, and good night.